How many of you guys are parents? All right, so you guys are developing and unlocking potential each and every day through that. My name is Garrett Clark. I am the founder and president of Inspired Solutions Consulting. Also, we were talking about an ice cream shop here in Statesboro that my wife and own. It's called the Rolling Monkey. Anybody familiar with that little ice cream shop? So there, if you've been there, we're really focused on culture and potential and people and trying to reach those pinnacle states. So that is one little prototype that we've used to kind of implement some of the theories. My background is lean engineering. I come out of some of the Fortune companies. Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems is one where we worked on large gas frame turbines or manufacturing large gas frame turbines. And I served as a lean engineer working on the implementation of the way. How many of you guys know what the way is? That's a tough one to describe. The way is something like culture. So that's your philosophy, the kind of the abstract, the vision, the values, those kind of things, but then also bringing it down into practicality. How do we get the way implemented on-site location? Typically, headquarters delivers the philosophy from Japan, and then it is distributed across many different plants. So that was a great learning opportunity that I've had in my history and my background. But through that, we've had some great lessons learned with the ice cream shop, like I shared with Rolling Monkey, and then through that, taking a lot of lessons learned. Really the question for me was, how do I distill down these principles at a first principle level that can then be read across and scaled back up to, say, Fortune companies like Mitsubishi? How does it apply at a mom and pop ice cream shop? How does it apply at a large organization? Also a baseball team, a university, you name it, any kind of team, any kind of organization, any kind of group. So that's what I'm deeply passionate about. That's a little bit about me and my background. But we'll go ahead and jump into it here. All right, so the engagement crisis. Here we have a Gallup report showcasing a 10-year low as it relates to employee engagement. So you can see that there was a rise, but then 2020 occurred, and then we have a continual decline that has really been felt across not only the US, but the world. And so here we can see a little contrast against the globe and where we stand. You can see actively disengaged. We're basically tied up there, not engaged, and then highly, or I wouldn't say highly engaged, but engaged here. And then what we have, which is quite depressing, is a number of 80% disengagement across organizations. Are you guys feeling that?
I don't know about 80%, but yes, you see people just go through the motions. They're just out there to do their 8, 10 hours and go home. That's it.
That's right. Checked out, disembodied, indeed. Well, it's good to hear that you're not feeling the 80%. And I do think we're quite blessed, especially in this region. There's a lot of growth that's occurring, as you guys are aware of. And I think we're in one of the higher grounds, so to speak. But nonetheless, this is a tremendous challenge. And this is a bit concerning to see that decline there. So why? One of the frameworks that I want to use to look at the root of this issue is Maslow's hierarchy. And the reason that I want to look at Maslow's hierarchy as a framework is because there's a basic scaffolding that is here. And also Maslow was a positive psychologist. He's looking at the, let's say, brighter side of humanity versus someone, say, like Freud, who's looking at all of the critical broken elements. What we pay attention to is kind of what emerges. So to me, that's a very important point, because here I'm going to be calling forth our attention to those higher points. What is the peak potential of human capability? But so that we're not too complex, I want to reduce it down to 3 categories, and I think Chip Connolly does a great job in distilling down those 3 categories of Maslow's into survival, succeeding, transformation. But what is quite interesting in this is these elements here and roughly what they equate to. So I want to contrast a little bit of what is the existing offering primarily within the workforce or many organizations. It would be we're offering money, a transactional based need. And so what do we get when we offer money? When we meet that need? We get a base motivation. So we have to think of how is it that we can offer more so that we might receive Loyalty. How important is loyalty in your organization? Pretty important. So there's a demand. So when you look at the survey feedback, it's very clear that whether it's male, female, young, old, recognition is number one. I'm not being seen, I'm not being recognized, and that's why I want to leave when it comes to the negative side of things. But what I would argue is even more important than that is meeting an unrecognized need, and that is of meaning, because this is where we're going to receive the pinnacle of inspiration, of engagement. So inspiration, that's that energy, that's that drive, that's that engagement. When you look at the definition of what inspiration is, you can look at the Greek, it's to breathe life. So there you share that it's as though we're zombies, or what you're witnessing is people just checked out. There's a checking out of that life, but I'm just here clocking in and following in with emotions. That's not good for anybody. So closing the gap, I want to introduce this framework. Who has seen this framework before, this purpose Venn diagram? You might have seen it floating around on LinkedIn. There's a lot of posts on this concept of Ikigai. And the reason I bring it in is because the longest living centenarians in the world, on average, live 7 years longer than the next longest living centenarians. So it's an abnormality from like a biology perspective, or let's say anthropology perspective. You see these individuals living excessive years, but not only is the life of the biology there, but they're some of the most fulfilled and happy people. And that's, to me, the real exciting thing. The life and the spirit is there. And so the Okinawans live by what they call as their Ikigai, which means their reason for being. And reason for being, that converts to purpose. They know their purpose. Their purpose is to generate that skill and that heart, leveraging that passion to serve others, to serve their community. And then in turn, there's a compensation for that. So it's a sustainable kind of philosophy is what we're looking at here. And I want to use this as a framework for us to contrast to Maslow's here, because they're really one and the same. They're looking at the same thing. Now, if you want to make it three-dimensional, what you could do is this as a side view, and then you take this as an overview. It looks like a cone. If you can use your imagination kind of looking at that. So you'll see, again, most employers are meeting these base needs with the compensation packages, but they're not meeting these higher needs. So this is the gap that we've got to close. And then same here. We've got, all right, you're getting a paycheck, but what are you missing? If you miss one of these, look at the consequence. So say you do a good job as an individual or a unified body, an organization, and say you miss just one. You have a feeling of satisfaction, but a feeling of uselessness. So, right, what is missing here? So they've got the good at, which would be the esteem. They've got the love, which would be something like the belonging. And then they've got the paid for, right? We see that this circle encompasses the paid for, which would be down here. But what are they missing? This. And so they feel useless. So just imagine the negative ramification of feeling useless. So do we see how that this is a need? And even though we can hit 3 out of the 4 and get a 75 on the test, we're still deeply missing a fundamental need. Hence Maslow, this is a hierarchy of fundamental needs. So this is what we need to be fully human, right? Instead of zombies walking aimlessly. So how is it that we close this gap? This is the target. We want to turn this green in all levels. And when we do that, what we receive are testimonies like this. Making me aware of what Ikigai was really helped me personally. It gave me a clear sense of my purpose and direction, helping me find fulfillment in the work I do each day. Now, Brandy said personally, but also the work she does each day. Why do you think that this is so important using this framework to align our organizational purpose with the individual purpose. Indeed. You want to say that a little louder for everybody in the back?
There is no organization without it.
Indeed. The organization is made up of the individuals. And if that potential isn't tapped into and aligned, what do we have? We just have a structure and some SOPs and a vision statement and a tyrant at the top is what it could look like, and in some cases does look like. But when you get the buy-in, because this presentation is about empowerment, when you get the buy-in to where individuals can see the win-win, that's where the beauty really happens, is when someone is deeply intrinsically motivated, not just the carrot. Because remember, this is the carrot stuff down here, right? But when we tap into the intrinsic motivation, that's when we got the heart, the buy-in, that full potential can be tapped into. So, yeah, Ikigai is a philosophical framework, so it's quite deep. Now, I studied civil engineering here at Georgia Southern. I never applied the civil engineering because I went right into lean manufacturing, but I think I still have a couple of those principles that exist because civil engineering is the oldest engineering that there is. It's the foundational, it's the simplest. It gets to the first principles. And to me, this is the first principle of that organizational building, right? Think of the philosophy as the foundation. Remember I talked about the way? You got to have a comprehension of where are we going? What is the vision? What is the mission? So when you hear these things of the mission and the vision, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about aims and directions of what people value and what they're oriented to. So when you love something, you light up, right? When that thing comes across, there's a way that can be measured and understood. And we, through different measurements, and it's fairly subjective, but observations can understand what somebody is moving towards and what they're moving away from through celebration, through where we're paying attention. That's just one way to look at what do we celebrate and love. Now, how does this scale up for the larger impact of what we're aiming to do? This is Chip Conley's framework as well, the relationship truth pyramid. So we just paid attention to this level here, which he is considering as the employee truth. But now we're introducing the customer truth, or you can think about it as a community truth. And then we have the investor truth, which basically equates to the sustainability. Now, what is our target to make this lasting impact, to yield a legacy with what we're building? Again, we have these transactional states, which are not bad in and of themselves, but if they're aimed at to be the end-all be-all, you fall short of the potential that exists. And so this is where we as leaders have to put our targets on these higher states of potential, not only with our employees, or if you have a nonprofit, those who are following you within that organization, but also who is it that you and your team, who are you serving? And how is it that you orient that team to serving what I'm going to call mission 2? I call this mission 1, I call this mission 2. To where you're not only meeting their expectation, not even meeting their desire, but ideally meeting that unrecognized need. Who here can give me an example of how to meet an unrecognized need?
Tax.
Yeah, indeed. And there were many of you who said you were parents, right? Raise your hands if you said you were parents. So when your child has a desire to eat ice cream for breakfast, do you give them that ice cream for breakfast? Maybe sometimes but for the most time, you're not. So you're meeting an unrecognized need by not meeting that desire, but doing something because you see the bigger picture of that child's life. And as parents, we do this. As leaders, we do this. And so if you can understand that principle, again, this is a good. And you can get great surveys where people are saying, this is what I want. But I want us to think beyond that. I want us to think of what is it who we're serving, what is it that they really need? But also, be cautious in that. There has to be humility in that, because to think that we're the ones who can understand it all, we need not be prideful. I'm looking for that balance of humility. But if you can strike that balance of humility, you can really reach the potential of the community and customer that you're serving. And then to carry it down through here, typically at the base level here, there's a transactional truth. Does the math math? And then from there, there is a stronger confidence in the harmony of the relationship. But here is that legacy, to where there's that pride of the ownership. And this is a cycle that Chip breaks down for us in his book, Peak, to where there is creating a unique culture, building the enthusiastic staff. And again, this is where we're going to be primarily focused, but it's for the purpose of this and this. And again, it's a sustainable system. So I want us to be able to take a look at the macro picture here. And then developing that strong and loyal customer base. And from there, maintaining the profitable and sustainable business that then feeds right back into the reinvestment of that culture. So it's a virtuous cycle is what it is. And think about spiraling up towards the light versus spiraling down towards hell. That's a way to think about the virtuous cycle versus the vicious kind of fragmenting cycle.
So are you going to talk about companies that do this well?
I am going to. I think you might be the one to guess which company I might be talking about.
Yeah, I can think of several, but I know one of them for sure.
Okay, so
I hope.
what comes to your mind when you think of servant leadership? What company do you think of?
Chick-fil-A.
There you go. Yeah, Chick-fil-A is a great, it's a household name. This is a company that we get to experience. It's not too far away from us, right? We get to go in with our family for breakfast, or I don't know if they serve ice cream for breakfast, but you could get your kid that ice cream for breakfast, maybe. I know that the chicken minis, they won't let me have that for lunch, and that, if they were real servant leaders, maybe they would. I kid. But Chick-fil-A is a great example of servant leadership. And the reason that I bring forth servant leadership is because in order to accomplish the three missions that we just saw, we're going to have to be servant leaders. It's going to take sacrifice on our behalf. Now, this is a great example of how Chick-fil-A meets all three of those missions that we just covered. So mission one, that was for who? What was mission one?
Employees.
Employees. So here we have the employee value proposition, meeting the base motivation, right? Also meeting that loyalty, getting to the higher tier. But when unlocking full human potential, this is what does it right here. This is that vision, that meaning, that bigger purpose. And they offer this value prop so that their employees love the work that they do. Check. Now, when you survey the public in regards to Chick-fil-A, when a Chick-fil-A enters into a space, here's the difference of how people believe that a franchise impacts their community in a positive manner, in contrast to negative. You can see that most individuals greatly believe that Chick-fil-A coming into their community is a positive impact. That's a beautiful thing. Typically, you hear the box stores coming in, it's like, oh goodness, here comes the franchises, they're just going to eat everything up. But what do we know about Chick-fil-A? They engage, they have that kind of servant heart towards the community. It's a win-win. So we'll give them a check for mission 2. And then for mission 3, right, the investor side of things, look at that. Isn't that unbelievable? I mean, you compile all of these 10 together, and they then stack up to Chick-fil-A. It's 10 on 1. So when it comes to this Pareto distribution, hands down, if you're looking for profit, invest in your employees so that they may invest in the people that you're serving so that you then have that sustainable business model. Do you see the philosophy? There's some steps to it. There's some depth to it. There's some investment to it, but it's worth it. It's worth it. I mean, it's worth it. So let's look at servant leadership a little bit deeper. Who here is familiar with John Maxwell? Okay. Who here is a fan of John Maxwell? Okay. I'm a fan of John Maxwell. For me, he gets to the depth, but he also can break it down pretty practical and simple. So his framework, 5 levels of leadership, is something that I've used within organizations that have really just helped me get clear on where I stand or where leaders stand, and what is that next step to get to the pinnacle level. So Maxwell defines the pinnacle level as respect, admiration. This is where you want your people to look up to you, right? But here, when we're given a position, we're given just that, positional leadership. Can we think of an example of what positional leadership looks like? Military, indeed. What we also see high respect in the military as well.
But when you have a brand new lieutenant straight out of college that's leading, some senior enlisted, but the position is what gives him the authority. He has to earn the respect.
Beautifully said. Did everybody hear that? Let's stop and talk on that point for a moment. This is where I'm going to shut up and then allow you guys to just kind of riff off of this point of positional leadership. So there we just heard a really good example of a new position being opened up. You have I won't restate it. You guys heard it, right? Okay. You guys are all experts. Just have a little courage and speak up.
People, or most like the people I work with, they can care less about what your time is. They're gonna follow you if they respect you, but they can care less. You can be a general manager, CEO, it makes no difference.
That's right. So there is kind of this explicit, this hierarchy that exists on paper, but the reality is there's a different hierarchy that truly exists. That's interesting. And as leaders, it's important to have those positions defined because we've got roles and responsibilities and KPIs and within those roles and responsibilities that we've got to support to keep the health of that organization together. But if we're not taking into true account the real dynamic as it relates to true leadership, which is respect, things can break down really, really quick with accountability, with communication. So do you think that, let's say that ideal general, do you think that ideal general who has, let's say, earned that respect with the majority, I kind of gave it away, but do you think they have respect with everybody?
They have positional respect.
Okay, that's right. That's right. And the thing I want to point out here is you may be at this level with some individuals, but you're not going to be at this level with all individuals. Some people are going to appreciate your style, and then they're going to follow you and look up to you. Where others, that is not their style, and then you kind of lose that. You can't please everybody. I know I try to, but it'll separate me. It'll pull me apart trying to please everybody. So this is where values come down and know where you're going, how you're going to get there, and the integrity aspect, and people will respect that. Level 2 is where Maxwell says that real influence occurs. Real leadership, and it's through influence. To your point of that influence. They follow you because they want to. And then once you get this trust, which is the fundamental point here, trust is what allows this to happen. Because that individual knows that you're going to put them first, right? You're going to take care of them. That you're not just going to squeeze everything out of them and just take advantage of that positional leadership. You're going to have their best interests in mind, and therefore they're then going to trust you. But then from there, you want to progress to performance. Then you want to get back on track But sometimes you have to move slow to move fast. You have to invest in that individual, be gracious with them to then be able to unlock their full potential. And then once you reach up to the pinnacle, that's where you start growing other leaders and so forth. But if you guys aren't familiar with John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, I highly recommend that you check it out. It's a great, great framework. So now that we understand the importance of servant leadership and what we're aiming to do, it's important that we create a flow-ready environment. Who here has heard the concept of flow? Who here has been so deeply immersed in your work where time disappears? That's great. Well, it can be. And it can also burn you out on the recovery side. But it's better than watching the clock and saying, my goodness, I am bored out of my mind. Time is just infinite. Or it's better than running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Those are the two extremes. And what we're seeking to find here is a balance. So when we're talking about peak potential, as leaders, we want to make sure we're placing our team in this zone of genius right here, this zone of learning, of growth. Look at these metrics. Are these metrics not wild? I mean, they almost seem like you want to go check them out to see if they're real. So the Flow Genome Project does some really good work with Navy SEALs, top executives, these different high performance, elite individuals. And this is the results. And think about that time where time has disappeared and you've been deeply immersed and deeply engaged in your work. Is that work not far greater than if you're just like overwhelmed like that chicken with your head cut off or just bored out of your mind? That's where the performance comes. I would assume that most of you in this room probably stay within this zone. But the question is, how many of your team members or those who you're leading are in that zone? It's your responsibility as the leader to get them here. The beauty is it's the win-win. So here's a couple of ways to look at it. So ideally, we're wanting to track in this one-to-one, right? So we want our ability to match our challenge. And if so, that's a 1-to-1 ratio, right? Unit of 1 places us at 1-to-1. But if we have far too much challenge and not enough ability, where's that going to place us? In an anxious state, right? Same with here. If that challenge isn't there enough, but we've got ample ability, we're going to be in a boredom state. So we're not engaged. So disengaged, disengaged. This is engaged right here. And then some of the names that you're probably familiar with are personality types, like or different ways to go about it. You got hardcore or novice, right? So this would be a learning track. So think of a video game. You take the novice route or you take the advanced route, right? You can see that relationship that's occurring there. So how is it that we move and progress our team through this ideal 1-to-1 channel or this flow channel where time disappears and we're learning through the roof, we're in a peak state of performance that really is the win-win for both the employee and employer or individual or organization. So we as leaders have the ability to influence these two variables, do we not? Give me an example of how we can influence someone's challenge.
Whatever task you assign.
That's right. That's right. How about on the skills? How can you influence their skills? Train them. So we've got the sink or swim method, which looks a little something like this. I'm going to throw you out the boat, and now you got to figure out how to swim. Now think about that method. As leaders, we can probably be that way in how we go about our leadership style. We can challenge very hard and expect them to get it. But for some, that might not be the best way for them to adapt and learn and grow. And you said the other way is the classroom method. So there, right, we bring them along this novice route, this more boredom state. Like we're here in the classroom, things are quiet, things are cool. And then my hope is you guys then step out and apply the knowledge into the real world environment. And these are the two methods we can use to balance and keep our teams in flow, in that zone of genius. Another way to think about this, again, is we'll take it back to parenting. With parenting, there's the hard truth, right? Truth is love. It can be loving if applied in the appropriate dose. Because if you provide way too much truth, if I tell my son all about the world when he's 3, that's probably not going to be too effective to his growth. That might even stun his growth, right? But challenge is good to a degree. And also, if my wife just doesn't challenge him at all and completely coddles him and doesn't allow any challenge into his life, when he turns 18 and we turn him out to the world, what's going to happen to him? The world's going to eat him up. So you can see excessive truth or challenge is not the best way. Excessive grace and empathy, I don't want to say empathy, but you can see what I'm pointing at there. Excessive comfort is not the best way. The balance of both is how you unlock the potential, is how you grow. With plants, you need sunlight, you need water. Think about those principles. The sunlight is that challenge, and then that water is that grace, it's that nurturing. Together, there's a ratio which yields the optimal growth of the plant. Now, when you go to Lowe's, there's different plant tags, right? What does the sunflower want? Do you guys know some people in your teams that are like a sunflower? Do you know some people in your teams that are, I don't know what a water plant is, that wants just a ton of water and no sunlight, but like a shade plant? You know what I mean? But you want the plant to grow, do you not? So don't take the shade plant and put it out in direct sunlight. It's going to die. So this framework can help us understand that balance of challenge and grace. Any questions here? So now, as it relates to these continuous cycles, so that flow environments, that's kind of our landscape. But how do we navigate this continuously? How do we go through continual growth cycles? One way to think about this, or one framework to use, is the hero's journey. So again, I talk about the way. This is more of a mythical framework, right? This gets quite abstract. But you guys understand this framework. In every movie that you've seen, it's followed a rough series of acts. Act 1, 2, and 3, right? Act 1, there's the ordinary world. So let's say Beauty and the Beast. I assume a lot of you guys have watched Beauty and the Beast. There, is it Bella? She is in the ordinary world, right? There's the same repetition. The baker comes out at the same point in time. All of the things happen in the same order. Everything is known, everything is understood, everything is put in its appropriate place and order. But what happens? What calls her into this special world, this unknown world? Does anybody remember? Her father goes off the beaten path and gets lost. And then she has to basically come and rescue him. And through that, she meets the little teacups and all the different allies and adversaries and mentors and all of those people along the way that ultimately help in her conquering the beast, where she tames the beast's heart, and then through that, there's an integration where they end up getting married together, right? It's a hero's journey. And let's not say all, but most movies follow this structure of this current state evolved to a higher state. But what did it take? It took a lesson learned. So think about the descent as the lesson, and think about the rise back up into the ordinary world as the learned. And so what you see is a development, and that's what is being shown here. And so this is a fractal pattern. So what that means is it is applicable at every level. Today I've got a hero's journey. I've got to wake up and I've got to go through this journey and then I'm going to go back to sleep. This week I've got a journey of things I'm trying to accomplish. This month, my lifetime. They're all this deeply familiar pattern that we all experience. And that's why movies are told with this framework, because it resonates and it brings all sorts of different people to the movie. The director follows this sequence. But you as a leader, are you not a director? Are you not directing the lives of those who you lead? Think about that. The director is building something that's going to go onto a screen, and there's a lot of different ways to reveal that, but the reality is each of you are directors here as leaders at this leadership conference. And it's not fake life, it's real life. And each and every day there is a call to action, a call to learning, to growing. And many times we can refuse the call and stay in that comfort zone that we just previously saw, or we can step into that challenge and then figure it out and then get on the saddle and get in that learning zone. And throughout this journey, there are going to be ebbs and flows. So we've got the lows, we've got the highs. We start here as Garrett 1.0. And my hope, actually, I would hope this had been a little higher. Because if you look back here, this would be Garrett 1.0, Garrett 2.0, if I learned. But I think in this model, maybe I'm set back. What's supposed to happen is you go through this, and well, here it is. It's the reward. So you enter back into and you gain something. Do we see the measurable difference between here? But then what happens after that reward? You go back through another cycle, right? Does anybody here know someone who just made it and then they're there for life? I'm sure there's some people who on their Instagram pose that that's the case, but that's not reality, right? This framework can be a structure to help with the lessons learned, the growth. To ask your employees or your team members, where are you on your journey right now? Are you at this stage? Are you just not wanting to deal with it? Are you remaining comfortable in this ordinary world, this safe space that you exist in? Or are you ready to step out into the unknown, where I'm calling you as a leader, so that you might be challenged and learn this lesson? It's going to be painful to shed off that dead wood. But if you don't shed off the dead wood, what happens to those trees where we get a little bit too protective and we don't want the trees to have any forest fires? What happens when a fire does come through after decades of no natural fires? They burn up. So if we remain in this space for too long of comfort, what happens when the big challenge comes along? It's going to knock you down a peg. It could kill you. Whether that's physically, psychologically, spiritually, whatever level you want to look at it. That's the reality of these patterns. And if we understand that as leaders, we can help navigate. But as we go through this, and we see that there are these different allies and enemies, and the basic villain that we have to face, the question that I have for you guys is, who are you? What role are you playing in this journey? Are you the victim? Are you the villain? Are you the hero? Are you the guide? I am all of those things. This framework is a recent framework that I came across for this presentation. You can check out the source here, but to me, I think it did a great job of framing. I just articulated the 4 archetypes of the villain, the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide. Now this takes it to where we have 6, and it shows a relationship here. And I think there's more understanding than my typical way of leveraging this. So I'm excited to understand this a little bit more. Is anybody here familiar with this framework? Okay. Well, I'm looking to study it a little bit more, but for me, it does make good sense. As a Christian, I do believe that we are created in the image of God, and God is a creator. So to me, this is that virtuous cycle, that we want to be creators. And then here, there is I don't know, I would think destruction would kind of be the negative or the inverse of that. But for me, this aligns with my theology, which goes a little bit deeper than the philosophy that I've talked about. So my faith, this reconciles with this. You know, this mythical story it's not contrary to my Christian belief set. But you have to check that for your own self. You know, if you can use something like this to identify yourself, how am I showing up? But the point is, if you can see yourself as a guide and then encourage your team members to be the heroes that are going through those cycles of continuous improvement, failing forward, death and rebirth, however you want to describe that hero's journey pattern, you can really help unlock their potential. Let's see, a key point. So yeah, shift into the empowerment dynamic by moving from victim to creator. And then you can see here, these can be nice jump points where you can transition from this state to this state and from this state to this state to ultimately move into this empowerment. And something important worth pointing out is that this comes from our passion. So remember the Ikigai, that purpose Venn diagram, those 4 circles overlapping? Remember passion was one of those? It's important that we discover that passion and harness it towards a point. Verse here, where does this drive come from? Anxiety, right? And I'll be honest, I felt anxiety today. I was behind schedule getting here to you guys, and the next thing I know, I start becoming efficient. And then I lose that integrity of being a good servant leader, walking graciously with the people around me. Because I need to be here on time, right? Wrong. But I became something like what I didn't want to be. But the awareness helps bring me back into a good place. So let's recap here. I've taken us through a series of frameworks, but the core frameworks as it relates to unlocking human potential are these 4. We've got the philosophical, the very deep purpose Venn diagram. Remember the Okinawans, basically they hit these 4 marks, and for them hitting these 4 marks, they live on average 7 years longer than the next longest living centenarians in the world. And they're some of the most fulfilled people. We can apply this within our workforce. We can understand what is our purpose as an organization and how do we invite others in to our organization to be in alignment with where we're going. What are we good at? How do we share that with others? What do we love? How do we share that with others? A practical tool here is onboarding, right? A job description. You define clearly who you are, clearly who you're not. And from there, that becomes your lead magnet to invite people in or to invite them out, right? Because those ends up being your values of what you're orienting towards. And we saw the relationship with Maslow's hierarchy, right? An older framework that is taught in a lot of the psychological literature and courses today, but a tried and true framework that simply helps us to understand there's more to life than just being in these demotivated, apathetic states. We have to reach for a higher potential. We want our team members to be highly engaged. And I know it's tough to see here, but what does that look like? What I do is for a greater good. I set an example that motivates others. I love it here. Remember Chick-fil-A, right? They're striving to meet that base need, that mid-tier belonging and esteem need, but also that higher calling and purpose through the vision that they have that inspires others. And then finally here, we have this cycle of the hero's journey to where we're all heroes and we're continuously cycling through this every day, every week, every month, every year, and ultimately through our lifetime. Now, this is something that I've never shared publicly, but I'm really excited to share it with you guys here today, is this framework. Through Inspired Solutions, we're bringing all of this together so that we may reach that full potential of each of those 4 pieces that we saw, to where there is deep alignment with purpose, not only with our organization and the organizations that we help to define organization and purpose, but aligning their individual counterparts to that. And then the fulfillment of the needs, reaching those highest peak states, and then structuring out the growth paths, and ultimately the engaged emotional states to where we're in that zone of genius, learning, growing, and bringing this together to help businesses really create thriving cultures. This is something that I'm deeply passionate about, and I'm very excited that I was able to spend this time with you guys here today and share these 4 pillars of what we have termed as meaningful, measurable impact. These are some reads that I would recommend if you are a reader. We covered Chip Conley's framework of peak. There are more practical details and frameworks within that book that can help you understand that mission 1, mission 2, and mission 3. John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, we looked at his framework. This book goes into more depth. Additionally, I included John Maxwell's book here that my grandfather gave me that really initiated a lot of my entrepreneurial journeys. But it's that vision, it's that dream. And we as leaders, we have to have that as visionary leaders ourselves, but also help inspire that within those who we lead. Good Business, this is by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So we covered the flow model, that balance, not to get into the extremes, but find that good balance. Good Business, there's good practical examples within this book here. And then Traction. We didn't get too much into it with weekly meetings, quarterly meetings, all of like how do you bring this together in scorecard reviews, but the practical structures and framework. Traction by Gino Wickman, EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. That's another great book to help bring this abstract stuff that I'm talking about into practicality and structure. Ikigai. So we talked about the Okinawans. This book is basically how the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. And then The Servant, a simple story about the true essence of leadership. And with that said, that's the end of my speech. I do appreciate your guys' time and attention, and I hope you guys have taken something valuable away from this presentation and you apply it next week. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir.